truth and justice. With that, I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Gary Olson, who is a professor of political science at the Moravian College. And I would not be giving you much introduction, but his words will speak for him. I invite Professor Gary Olson.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry if my voice is a little not what it should be today, but I had a flu this week, and I had a flu shot too. I think it might be some virulent Zionist strain of the flu, maybe.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you very much. There's no place I'd feel more comfortable today than being right here with you, unless it was maybe inside. Occasionally I receive emails that congratulate me for my courage to speak out on issues in the Middle East. My reply is that it doesn't take any courage for a tenured full professor with academic freedom who can't be fired to speak out.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
What would be courageous is if a few of our high-level elected officials stop pandering to the Israeli lobby.
Yes.
That would be courage.
How about that?
And of course, unbelievable courage is being exhibited at this very moment by our brothers and sisters in Gaza.
Yes, indeed.
As they face a blitzkrieg by the fourth most powerful military in the world.
Right.
Speaking of politicians, according to the recent Rasmussen poll, a clear majority of folks who voted for Obama oppose Israeli policy. However, virtually every top official is on the other side. Isn't that an affront to democracy?
How about that?
Isn't that a failure of accountability?
Indeed.
Just this week, the Senate voted unanimously to support Israel's right of self-defense. And President-elect Obama has publicly identified his two daughters with Israeli children exposed to possible danger and death. Obama says a father should worry about his children, and he should, and that's well and good. But Mr. President, aren't the Maliyas, aren't the Sashas of Gaza with their legs blown off, wrapped in shrouds, aren't they part of our world too?
Yes. Indeed.
Aren't they worthy of breaking your shameful silence and expressing compassion and grief? I could be wrong, but it's my sense that if the American public had more knowledge, more exposure, they wouldn't tolerate what's going on. But just as the Bush administration learned and practiced in Iraq, Israel has not allowed media access to their operations.
Right.
The AP said this is unprecedented restrictions, and the media only experiences the conflict from the Israeli side. This isn't to shield the Israeli public, who has pretty much adopted an attitude of indifference, but for the American public. Accurate information is very hard to get at. For example, and this is an important one, Israel, not Hamas, broke the ceasefire on November 4th, 2008, on specific instructions by Ehud Barak. The rocket barrage was a response, and it provided the predictable pretext for the Israeli invasion, an invasion that was planned at least 6 months ago. Hamas and Israel had an informal agreement in June of 2008. And here's what we didn't read in our press, and I brought this quote along. This was in all of the European newspapers. It was in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. It was in Amnesty International. Quote, Israeli forces entered Gaza and killed 6 Palestinian fighters. A barrage of Palestinian rockets followed this incursion. See? Of course, a ceasefire wouldn't be sustainable anyway because of the Israeli blockade and the Palestinians having no choice but to resist. Now, can you hear back there?
Yeah.
Yes?
A little bit.
What about this claim that Israel is acting in self-defense? That we would do the same thing if Mexico were to lob some rockets into Texas or California? To me, This is like some thugs appearing at your front door in Allentown, taking your house, tossing you into the street, and then when you try to reclaim your house, shooting at you and screaming, self-defense, self-defense.
Allahu Akbar!
Allahu Akbar!
Or let's say that Mexico had been occupied by the United States for 40 years and then elected a government that the United States didn't like. Let's say the United States then lays siege to Mexico and blockades it by land, by sea, by air, deprives them of food, deprives them of medicine, and blockades it, and then the president says, we want to see the Mexicans get thinner and starve to death. Then Mexico launches the equivalent of a few bottle rockets into Mexico, into Texas. Would any sane person doubt their right to do so? I mean, the arguments here are really quite preposterous. You know that the Israelis named their operation Cast Lead. Given the facts, perhaps the operation should have been called Operation Chutzpah. By the way, you may know that cast lead is the English equivalent of the famous Hebrew Hanukkah song, My Uncle Made Me a Dreidel of Cast Lead. That's an effort to resonate war with goodness and with fond memories.
Well.
And the assault was launched on the 6th day of Hanukkah. Even policies that appear as exceptions are otherwise. An Israeli professor admitted this week that allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza was only done so that a total civilian catastrophe wouldn't occur. Because if that happened, then the Israelis would be forced to withdraw. World opinion would force them to withdraw. Isn't that pretty cynical? Some aid is to allow aid to reach the Palestinians so you can have more time to kill more of them. Sadly, Israel is only restrained by how much it can get away with before the country is totally isolated by the rest of the world, and it's also restrained by how many IDF casualties the Israeli public will tolerate. For the most part, Israel has contempt for world opinion. The only opinion they really care about is the U.S. political establishment. Those who send the blank checks, those who send the Apaches, those who send the F-16s, those who send the white phosphorus bombs. If that's the case, then the allies of the Palestinians, the people here, and the real allies of Israel's best long-term interests must make it more costly for U.S. elites to remain complicit in Israel's policy. I'm not optimistic about this issue. The first time I visited Palestine in 1981, I didn't encounter any Hamas types. The only people I met were various factions of Fatah. But to counter Fatah, the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia funded Hamas to try to create a counterweight. Then, when they won free and fair elections, they became redundant and useless, and they turned against them. Do American people want to push matters even further and fuel a united Islamic fundamentalism? Do they want to build a foundation for Al-Qaeda? A new generation of people, millions of Arabs, are watching what's happening on YouTube. They're watching what's happening on Al Jazeera. They're watching an inhuman Israel, and this will be a lasting legacy. So-called leaders in the Arab world, from Egypt, from Jordan, are viewed as pathetic collaborators with Israel and the United States.
Allahu Akbar!
This is what's being sown by Washington's uncritical support for Israel's heinous actions in Gaza. I know that's why you're here today, because you know we have a moral responsibility not to let that happen.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to share the struggle with you today.
Thank you. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!